Welcome back to Business of Drinks. I'm Erica Ducey.
And I'm Scott Rosenbaum.
Today we're talking with Andrew Merinoff, co-founder and CEO of Chinola Fresh Fruit Liqueurs, a brand that's grown quickly by doing something deceptively simple, focusing on real fruit, a single clear use case, and making it easy for the trade to understand where this product fits.
Chinola's flagship passion fruit liqueur is produced in the Dominican Republic and uses fresh fruit. It's built with the occasion in mind, and that's really what's helped to drive this brand's growth and its strong adoption is its use in the on-premise, right? Where bartenders are actually putting it on menus and into cocktails, and they're finding folks reordering it.
Yeah, and this is a good example of a principle that we come back to often, which is that distribution doesn't build brands, velocity does.
Yeah, that's really where this conversation does get interesting.
Andrew has experience across brand, distribution, and sales, and he brings a very grounded view to how the three-tier system actually works day to day.
We discuss what it takes to get a distributor to pay attention, and more importantly, what happens after you get into their portfolio. Because for most emerging brands, that's where expectations and reality start to diverge.
We also get into the role of the supplier versus the distributor. What should you actually expect from your wholesaler? And as a brand, where do you need to take ownership if you want the product to move?
There's a strong focus on execution at the account level, including, how relationships are built, how accounts are won, and how brands earn their place on a menu or on a shelf.
And that extends to sales reps. We talk about what to do when you actually walk into an account, how to build credibility, and how to create pull so that your brand gets prioritized instead of overlooked.
For founders, this is a clear look at how to build within the constraints of the system and how to use focus to your advantage. Chinola didn't launch with a broad portfolio. They led with one product, one flavor, and one clear role behind the bar. This focus, this repetition and amplification of fine tuned messaging is what they use to scale.
And for sales teams, this is a practical guide to how the job actually works, not in theory, but the day to day decisions that actually determine whether a product sells through.
So, if you are trying to understand how to drive growth in the three-tier system, or you're launching a brand, or a few years into running one, this conversation is one you'll want to hear.
Here's our conversation with Andrew Marinoff. And now, a word from our sponsor. If you're a founder building in functional CPG or drinks, this is important to know. Be Tomorrow Ventures invests in both early and growth stage brands. But what makes them different is what comes after the check. Founders get access to a real operating platform, including growth marketing, data, distribution, talent, and commercialization support. It's venture capital designed for brands that really want to scale. To learn more, visit betomorrowv.com. And now, back to the show. Andrew, welcome back to the Business of Drinks. It's great to see you.
Oh, happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah, so we first had you on the show in episode 8 to talk about M&A in the drinks business. And it's hard to believe that was over 100 episodes ago. But for people who didn't hear that episode, tell us about your background and the path that led you to founding Chinola.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's wild that it's been that long. As you may recall, I had a pretty early start in the culinary world, cracking eggs like the typical kid at 3, unlike the typical kid in culinary class by 5, teaching the adult class by 9, staging in kitchens by 13, opening up restaurants in New York City at 15 under the guidance of BR Guest Restaurants and Steve Hansen, and really shifting throughout very different roles to learn different disciplines. By the time I got to college in hospitality, it probably held, 15 different jobs, 3,000 hours work experience. I went to study food and beverage and international business and learned some disciplines in technology. After college, joined and started my career at Proximo Spirits in New York City, which is the Jose Cuervo family in the M&A and development world, and spent a decade there first starting Chinola. So I've walked in all the shoes, learned the various disciplines, and here we are today.
Yeah, yeah. Well, before launching the brand, what was the gap that you saw in the market that felt worth building a company around?
So, had built various businesses and various brands, but I think it was less about building a liqueur brand and more about fixing one. It was less about building Chinola and more about fixing the liqueur category or cordial category as a whole, which we saw as broken. And that's what really led us to where we are today.
Yeah, and I know that the vision for Chinola is so much different than most fruit liqueurs. So, like, take me through the sort of mission and ethos of the brand.
Yeah, so we were looking behind the bar and we were looking in the retail stores, and everything that we saw was artificial. It had been built in a lab, not on a farm. It used ingredients you couldn't really pronounce. We wanted to change that. We also wanted to reshift the narrative of, instead of being sugar forward, be flavor forward, be citrus forward. So we started with the idea of, can you put fresh fruit into a bottle and make it shelf stable? And then can you scale that fresh fruit shelf stability at volume? And we found that ethos in 2014 in a Vitamix blender. And it was really easy to do at 1 or 2 bottles, at 3 bottles. It's when we decided, hey, we're going to make a scalable brand. And we went on that journey. 5 years and 2,000 test batches later, we derived at the first product that we thought was market ready.
Yeah, yeah. Well, can you walk us through the current product lineup and the SKU strategy today?
Yeah, so we really were the world's first shelf stable fresh fruit liqueur with no additives, no preservatives, no coloring, no flavoring. But we were that as a passion fruit liqueur company. And in 2024, after years of R&D, we came out with mango. And in April of that year, we decided we were going to be a fresh fruit liqueur company. And in April of 2025, we launched pineapple. And we realized that we had space to develop flavors with real fruit, but they'd be very disciplined launches. And they took years to develop. So right now we have the 3 hero SKUs served in 750 or 750 milliliter bottles with 50 mLs. And the idea was, we're taking ingredients that are used behind the bar that have acidity, and trying to put them in bottles. And anytime you see a release, it's not as fast as going to a lab and picking out a flavor extract. It's going through the whole agricultural ecosystem. It's how we can make sure we can go from seed to vine to bottle.
Yeah, yeah. And what were the biggest challenges of creating a fruit forward, shelf stable core?
I don't think there's anything that wasn't a challenge. I think that there is the inflection point of quality and mission. And mission critical was the acidity, the fresh fruit components of it. And past that was the shelf stability. And the issue with fresh fruit and why people don't do it is it's denser. So it naturally will sink to the bottom. pH levels don't necessarily react really well when blended together or when oxygen really hits them. So there's a whole molecular science behind it. And the biggest challenge is we're really understanding the various ingredients that we're putting into a bottle, at what stage they need to interact with each other, at what temperatures they need to interact with each other. And there were so many times along the way we were like, all right, we're just going to throw this one ingredient in there and this will be easy. And I'm happy that we stayed true to our ethos to get to where we are today. But the real hidden goal was put pH in a bottle that isn't tweaked by things that you can't pronounce.
I remember way back when we had talked about passion fruit liqueur and that it was a good starter product for the brand because it had acidity levels that were advantageous for shelf stability. Now, how have you managed that with other products like mango, which may not be as acidic?
It's a great question. And there was a lot more behind it because acidity was really key. And you want something that's highly acidic because there's less chance of bacteria being into it. And then we learned what pectin was. And pectin, although it exists in passion fruit, is way smaller molecularly than it is in mango. And the difference to the consumer would be, if you bite into a passion fruit, it's not getting stuck in your teeth. You bite into a mango in the wrong season, and you need a tool to pull it out. And what we realized with mango is it was way more temperamental. The growing season was different, but the ripeness was also very key, because to fully puree mango was much more difficult, and it did have a lower acidity, which meant it had to be hit with a higher proof alcohol at a very different stage in the process. So we thought it'd be, oh, we've done passion fruit for years, we're just going to throw mango into that same process. 2.5 years later, we were able to launch mango, and that's how long they take to develop.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how did you know when Chinola's original SKU, the passion fruit, how did you know when it was ready to bring to market?
It's what sounds like such a easy question is so complex. I think the simplest way to answer it is we knew it was ready for market when people stopped giving me feedback on it. When the trade stopped giving me feedback and they started ordering it, we knew we were ready. And again, there was so much more to it. But once the criticism, and the criticism will never stop, but once the feedback stopped and orders came in, we knew it was going to be ready for market.
Yeah, yeah. And when you launched, take me through the initial go-to-market strategy. Where did you focus first and why in those areas?
So we've discussed kind of the problem we wanted to solve, which was acid in a bottle and citrus in a bottle first. We knew that in order to identify with that, it had to be done in the cocktail strategy. And the best people to educate you on a cocktail is the on-premise. So we naturally figured out our market fit was on-premise, and it wasn't 300, 500 accounts. It was 25 to 50 accounts. And they were cocktail focused programs that cared about quality. They knew how to use an ingredient like us. And remember when we last spoke, the early days, Chinola would brown after a year. It would separate. They used to call it the lava lamp. You had to shake it, had to refrigerate it. And so the early days, it had to be put in the hands of the trade because the consumer would look at it and thought it went bad. So our first few years were developed in the on-premise at a very targeted approach and a menu-driven approach, not a pod approach. Yeah, so we first identified the problem that they had, and that was refrigeration space. We were hunting in New York and Florida. Consistency was key. High quality cocktails was key. The idea for them wasn't always true margin hunt. It was best in class. And we built something that was best in class. That was a tool for them to use. But we also, as two co-founders, went in there and we got behind the bar. We trained them on the product correctly. And we didn't bring them something that they might want or might need. We brought them something that at the time was critical to their path to success of delivering the best drink possible.
Yeah, yeah. And since then, how has the adoption of the mango and the pineapple gone so far?
So on the earlier podcast or narrative I used to give, it was core focus, stick with one thing and do it really well. And we did that for a long time. When we developed mango, I drank my own poison and we launched way too fast with a fruit that we didn't have enough experience with. Because remember, when we were launching passion fruit, it was 300 cases, then 500, then 800. With mango, we made 2,000, the most perfect mango cases you can imagine. And the demand got way too big. And we went over our skis and we had to make 7,000 cases. But not understanding the fruit enough, we didn't understand the pectin levels. And honestly, the first 2,000 we won awards for. The next 5,000, it was real fruit in a bottle. There was pulp in there. It was not meant for the average consumer to really understand how it worked. So mango didn't go according to plan. I can't say that it was a very smooth entry, but everyone trusted that we knew what we were doing and there was real liquid in a bottle. And we learned a lot from that failure. Pineapple was a different story. People grew up with Dole as the pineapple benchmark. And so people had a comparison we didn't have with passion fruit. No one had a level playing field with passion fruit because we told them what it should taste like. With mango, although they drank purees on vacation and whatnot, it wasn't really available. Pineapple was the trickiest because people were set in the ways of what something should taste like. We were then telling them, maybe not, maybe it should taste like this. And you would be surprised some of the top end bars that said we prefer to use Dole because that's what our consumer base knows. And those are the hard moments where a founder really needs to sit back and realize, all right, this is now going to be a tougher conversation than we thought it was going to be. But every launch had its different merits with a different fruit. And yeah, I could go on days for talking about how I'd redo it and what haunts me at night. But those are a few of the early challenges we faced.
Yes, yes. Well, okay. So I'm curious to hear, has there been a moment where you felt that you hit real product market fit?
Yeah, again, and not to give a short answer, when the reorders started happening and volume projections we could predict. Like we knew people were going to reorder. We knew that when the bar was developing their cocktail menu, they were doing it around one of our SKUs. It was no longer we need a margarita. It was we need a Chinola cocktail on our menu with this flavor. Or we need to develop the pornstar martini, and this is the passion we're going to use. So how do we balance around that specific cocktail? We knew we had something there, and it was a great reflection moment. But that was 5% of a much larger battle that we had to face.
Yeah. Chinola has grown from roughly 17,000 cases in 2022 to over 40,000 cases in 2025. So when you look back, what were the key drivers of that growth?
We evangelize the trade. The trade were our key gatekeepers. And we in 2020 had a market shift of 95 plus percent on premise, 5% off. The 5%, I'd say 3% of that was we knew we had to go to Tales of the Cocktail. So we had one store in Louisiana, in New Orleans that stocked us, and we would go buy the cases because we had to go to an event. We were a buy the trade for the trade type brand. As we started to understand how to evangelize the trade and make them the cool gatekeepers of the brand, we started to really win on premise. And then we learned what a total wine store was. And that was because when you're 95% shift towards on premise and COVID hits, you lose the whole business. So it's wild to think in 2022 we were at 17,000 cases because in 2020 we were supposed to do 3,000, and after losing the accounts we were going to do 300. So we really found that balance. But we also, more importantly, did those 17,000 cases in only a few select states. We weren't nationwide at the time. We weren't a global brand. We were really building slowly and organically. I think the way to, I guess, summarize our volume, velocity, visibility, and the way we grew is, 500 accounts to 700, but going from 500 to 700, we didn't lose any.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know that today around 60% of the business is on premise. Talk about the other channel mix. Is the rest of it retail, or do you do any sort of, kind of modified DTC anywhere? Like, what does that look like, and what works specifically at retail?
Yes. So we have worked and spent a lot of time and efforts getting the at-home consumer to understand our product and how to use it at home. And that was the hardest challenge for us. In retail, liquid to lips is the only thing that we have going for us. The only thing that we can do to compete, because some of the liquids do look similar. We have competitors that have similar color liquids. We're in a stock bottle. We don't have a custom fancy bottle to tell our story. No one's going to a liquor store or saying, what's the best fresh fruit liqueur do you have? They're going to say, where's the tequila, vodka, gin, whiskey? Education. We want education at the store level, liquid to lips, tasting consumers on it, and then teaching people how simple it is to use Chinola, which really is pre-batch citrus, simple syrup, and a liquor in a bottle, and takes away a few steps from the at-home mixology world, which we heavily promoted through a very localized channel. Think, and not macro influencers, not celebrities, micro influencers targeted at, say, 1,000-person audience in a very specific area, rinsed and repeated numerous times across the US.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when you're thinking about your target consumer today, what does that profile look like?
It's really hard to narrow down the target consumer because it really comes down to the target taste profile. What's funny is when we talk about the trends and the low ABV and sustainability, right now, better for you, low ABV, sustainability, pay fair wages isn't the trend, it's the baseline. It's the baseline at which we operate. It's no longer, hey, this is something that we need to identify into. No, that is the starting point of where you need to grow from. So we use a lot of those things as our starting point. I could never tell you the demographic because in the world's best bars, we're in a complex cocktail of 15 ingredients. And in the Irish dive bar down the street, we're in the porn star martini. And in Georgia, we're in this drink with a super sweet cava as their chismosa, their sparkling wine cocktail. But in Illinois, we're with the driest brute you've ever had. And it really comes down to, you can put whiskey drinkers into a demographic, you can put gin drinkers, tequila, but everyone in the world eats fruit. So anyone that enjoys some type of fruit or another is a client of ours, of 21, obviously, and drink responsibly is what we have to say. But we fit the cocktail culture from the beer shandy up to the Michelin-rated restaurant.
Yeah, yeah. And at my house, it's Chinola and soda. I'm one of your target consumers as well, apparently. So let's get into some sales philosophy. I mean, you have such a deep background in this. So I want to start to understand for people who are, getting into the industry for the first time or maybe taking on sales roles, how is it that you decided early on and even today, which accounts are worth your time?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different answers to that question, but really the key first part is accounts that are worth our time are ones that are going to put us on the menu. Menu is what drives everything. I don't incentivize anyone on a pod or point of distribution because no one's going to a bar, like I said, asking what's the best passion fruit liqueur do you have. If their cocktails are above a certain threshold and price point, if their cocktails include ingredients that are at premium level, or if their team is trying to elevate things past, a base spirit and a a soda water, which is what I guiltily drink on a regular basis, that's probably a core account of ours, but it's got to be a listing. And how we derive at that is we do our homework. And I don't think it's about getting the 100 accounts that are good. I prefer 20 accounts that are incredible.
Yeah, yeah. And it sounds like there's no easy way to find those accounts. It probably is really looking at the cocktail culture of a given city or market and like trying to understand where those types of venues are appearing. So, when you think about your accounts, do you segment them in any way? Do you have like a gold, silver, bronze framework for accounts? Or how do you instruct your team on how to spend and segment their time?
I think that when we segment accounts, it's more on the off premise, to be honest, which is different for most people. The off premise to me is the A cluster, B cluster, and C cluster. Convincing someone to walk into a store with 5,000 options, it's much harder to get them to pull $30 cordial off the wall versus when a bar already does it for me. They only list 6, 10, 15 things. Cheesecake Factory, it's 40 things, so to me, it's less about the segmentation and more about the velocity it's going to portray. And so when we look at accounts and identify them, I call it the 3 Vs. It's the volume, the visibility, and the velocity. And they don't all have to interject with each other. We can have the best visibility account that doesn't do a lot of volume, but gives us, say, the best social media reach. We could have the best volume account that does nothing for us, but produces the best value. So there's so many ways to dice it. It comes from experience. And we go into areas, we meet the locals, we find out where do the trade go when they're done with their shift, where do they go drink, and we go there and we meet the trade and we say, what are your favorite 10 bars, 15 bars? It doesn't need to be the world's best 100 to be an amazing account. It's got to be the one that's open to learning something. Because if no one wants to learn or be educated on something, it's going to be a losing account. But if they get really behind your story and they feel like a brand evangelist and they want to tell your story, that's a winning account.
Yeah, yeah. And you've worked with so many sales reps at this point. What are the most common mistakes that you see sales reps make?
It will go back to the pod thing. Success does not come from a 2-bottle placement on a back bar. Success comes from a menu. So walking into accounts saying, oh, I got them to take 2 bottles. I say, oh, cool. So I'll go next year. I'm going to sing happy birthday to those bottles. Because they're either going to sit in the back office as a favor or they're going to sit in the back bar. And for us, in 2 years, they'll be brown. In 3 years, they'll be a goner. They'll be history. Will the bar make it? The mistake that they make is I have 100 points of distribution and we sold 30 cases. And I think a great example of that is we won a massive chain in Florida, a really big chain. Everyone was, heaving for joy. But I know what that chain was going to ask us. They were going to ask for samplings, tastings, not allow us to dictate the time in which those tastings happen, which means they could happen at 8 o'clock in the morning when no one's drinking anything, or they maybe where the state was in Florida, they might be. But we were set up for failure. What we should have tried to do is instead of getting all 200-300 stores, we should have gone for the A cluster and gotten the 30 stores we wanted to. And then we got disqualified. But first we got threatened by being DQ'd from them, saying, if you don't show up more, we're going to DQ you. We were burning ordinance or cash left and right. And it was the first store that I was like, okay, finally, we can be DQ'd from here. There's no more pressure, no more stress. We might never be allowed back, but now we've learned from our mistake, because losing 300 points of distribution to sell 30 cases a year, it should let you sleep better at night, versus I had stores with 30 locations selling 300 cases a year that asked for nothing. I prefer to spend my time wisely on those 30 than inappropriately in 300.
Yeah, yeah. That's great advice, I think. So for your teams, how do you think about call frequency and routing? And what does a high performing weekly plan look like?
And here's where it's really going to come to geography. A person in New York City, where I'm based, 10 square blocks, it could take you a year to learn the people in those 10 square blocks. And by the time you get to block 10, blocks 1 through 3 have change management. So I think routes are planned very differently and KPIs should be set accordingly. I have salespeople that might only visit 5 accounts a day in Atlanta, Georgia, but they're the most high impact accounts possible. And normally brands would call that a CAM or a key account manager. We have high impact ambassadors that will go visit 15 bars, but they'll pop in, say hello, and they'll leave. And I think it depends on the city. The most expensive cities to do business in the US are New York, Florida, California, Texas, and Illinois. yet it's the 5 that everyone wants to launch at first. And I think everyone should launch in one of those, maybe 2. Or if you are capitalized with millions of dollars, launch all 5. But know that Texas is a Class B state. California is very vast. Illinois, very brutal. Miami, very trend-setting. And New York City, where everyone wants to play. So our teams are very different. Where we operate and what I call efficiency, I don't think there's any clear-cut answer to that. But time management is really crucial. And then understanding when you're going into an account because you should be there or because you want to be there. My dad always said it since childhood, nothing good happens after 10 p.m. So if you're still there, it's because you want to be, not because you need to be.
I love that. Thinking about on-premise. So within on-premise accounts, who are the key decision makers that matter most? And how do you tailor a pitch to reach each of their needs?
If I were to break down an on-premise account, and there's probably 5 core people, but I'm going to narrow it down to 3. You need the bartender / mixologist, and that's for what we call adoption. They need to want to use your brand regularly, not only for the cocktail you place on menu, but when someone says, can you suggest something? Or can you make me a margarita? You want them to say, do you want a passion fruit margarita? Because I can know how to make one. So the bartender mixologists with no decision-making power, but the day-to-day influence, we call adoption. I think the second level to that really comes down to the beverage director, and that's really mixability and menu decision-making. And so when we're pitching them, it's about the menu, it's about the flexibility of the brand, the partners that we're going to bring in, and how it's going to not only help with consistency, but help with, I think, the overall beverage program as a whole. And then the third tier is the GM, and we call the general manager margin. Talk about margin, talk about costing, talk about efficiency. And once you can nail those 3, you've now have the person that does the finances saying, I approve this financially, the beverage director who says, I can work this into the menu, and the person selling the drinks to win the customer. That to me is a hierarchy. And everyone else, they matter, but without winning all 3 of those, you can't do staff education because if they don't align, no one else on the team will.
Yeah. Love that. So how does that differ when you're selling into the off-premise? What changes in who you target and how you sell?
Off-premise is as tricky as it gets without preset meetings or something that's truly differentiated. So I think there's a really big point between indie retail, so independent retail, and chain retail. Chain retail, you can't just walk into a Total Wine and expect to get nationwide Total Wine distribution. You need to be very state selective. With indie, you got to be a pest. It's not going to happen on the first visit. Their shelf space is very unique to them. It's very valuable, and they don't want to sit on things collecting dust. It normally takes a lot of data, and why we like to go deep instead of wide is it's much easier to walk into one of them and say, this has worked here, and here's how it's worked. So we always try to win our backyard first. Chinola wasn't built in 30 states. It was built in 2. But we did build in New York and Florida because I was in New York. My co-founders were in Florida, and we went out and we built the brand ourselves. We didn't have a distributor. We didn't importer. We collected the data. We built it a decade ago, and we built it with a bottle that if it sat on shelf for more than a month would separate, it would brown, but we got the sale through. And the key part for us was don't take in 10 cases. I've had people say, we'll take in a pallet. I'm like, please don't do that. Take in 10, and then we'll resell. We'll replenish the 10 when it's there. But that win really does come with data, and it's the chicken or the egg approach. And 10 stores, choose them wisely, choose them high visibly, and go in and then offer to do the tastings yourself. I have personally completed over 500 tastings in retailers by myself in the last 5-10 years. And I've proven concept. And that's what it really takes to drive that.
Yeah. And what have you learned about timing? So when are accounts most open to new products, and how should brands be thinking about buying windows?
All right, it's a great question. Do not go to a bar after 5 p.m. when they've opened and their busiest hour and try to talk to someone unless you're going to dinner there and just expect to leave a card. Like, don't do your sales pitch after 5 p.m. when they're making tips. That's a horrible idea. Most likely don't go to the bar Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Daytime is key. Meeting them at their angle, and Mondays when they're slow, even though normally like the GM, they're not going to be there. When we look at cycles, assume that by May, our menus are locked in.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
And today, that sponsor is Business of Drinks. If you're building a drinks brand right now, you already know how hard it is to tell what actually matters versus what's just noise.
We see this all the time. Brands have to move fast, but they're often making these rush decisions without enough structure, data, or outside perspective.
That's why we built Business of Drinks Advisory Services. to help founders and leadership teams make smarter calls around growth, distribution, brand positioning, and fundraising.
This is focused, tailored, hands-on advice from the people who've actually built brands, worked with distributors, and helped the best up-and-coming drinks companies scale.
If you want to learn more, reach out. We're at info@businessofdrinks.com. And now, back to the show.
That September menus are being locked in August, but no one wants to talk to you in August because everyone's away or they're busy finishing up the summer. Always be 45 days ahead of when you think menus are going to shift, and menus in Massachusetts shift differently than in Florida. Florida is really great during the off-season, the winter time, really slow during the summertime. Texas, there are certain places there that are very tourist-centric in one part of the year, not others. Colorado, expect Denver to be year-round, but mountain towns to be in November. Like, there's no one good answer, but always be 45 days ahead of the curve, and follow-up is key. Do not be a pest when it comes to on-premise, but follow-up is really crucial to be top of mind. And handwritten cards, a little note, a little mini or a bottle sent them 45 days after. Hey, don't forget about us when you do the menu. Follow-up is the most key thing you can do, because I bet you the second you left, 100 other brands are coming after you.
Yeah. And they're probably not following up, so top of mind. And so when your team walks into an account, do they have a pre-call plan? And if so, what does that look like?
So I think there are the check-in accounts, and then there are the mission critical accounts, and they're both different. The objective is the same. If we're checking an account, we already have the menu. We're going to swing by because we always said we would support it. We're there to say hello. By the way, here are the other two flavors. Pre-check is know their menu, know who the team is. There's nothing worse than you not knowing the person's name or what their ambitions are, knowing the food, light suggestions as well. Oh, we see you're doing a ceviche. That would pair great with this cocktail that we've done. Once the pitches are tailored to the account, they feel like you've done your homework and paid attention. You haven't just shown up with a bag. The second part is, can we offer you something? A staff training. Can we offer you an education? I think the best part brands can do, hey, when you do that new cocktail, can you send me a high-res photo in the recipe so I could post it on our Instagram? We want to promote your brand. And like I said, the last part is the follow-up and support. And they have to be done in tandem. And it can't just be in a molecular order. It's got to be tailored to that specific account. And no two accounts are created equal.
And let's talk about goal setting. How is it that you help your reps goal set and understand what is going to be achievable?
So first of all, I think it's sitting at the table eye to eye with each other and agreeing of something that's obtainable. To pretense that I had reps that came to me and said, we ran this incentive program. The final payout could have been $25,000 to our distributor, but we only had to pay $300. And I'm like, okay, that was a failed incentive, because we knew dollar for dollar what our budget would entail if we hit the sales goal. So if we only hit 1% inflection point, we wrote the wrong goal. And the same goes for our reps. I love bonus season when I can pay my team their bonus, because their bonus is directly inflicted by our sales numbers. So the better we do, the better the team does. No one wants to wake up in the morning with something that's unobtainable, because you need to have a win. And I always say in the morning, the first thing I do is make the bed, then I brush my teeth, and then I do the next 5 things. This way I start my day and I've already achieved 8 tasks. Every day before I start my day, I've already done 8 things successfully. They might be small and minuscule, but it starts your day off in a routine. Our sales team knows that there is a routine that it can be accomplished. It can be difficult at times, and there is leeway, and everything needs to be adjusted quarterly basis. But being realistic in your goals is key. Setting your team up for success is key. And my New York City reps have a very different job than my Colorado rep does than the person going to the Ozarks in that lake. Really, the goal is 5 high visibility, velocity, volume targets versus the Texas rep, which is get Class B liquor stores that can then go sell to the on-premise, and hopefully we can track it all together. I think founders always make this cookie cutter approach of, here's the end goal, and it's simple, just get to it. There's a million steps in the middle. Without seeing eye to eye and walking a day in your team's shoes, you're never going to get there. Hence why I filled every position within the company before. I know what they go through on a day-to-day. Understanding the objective yourself is the only way to help them achieve it.
Yeah. And it sounds very market dependent as well. So what does your company's tech stack look like? And how are you capturing data and unlocking insights to help improve your team's performance over time?
Yeah, so I think there's a few basic fundamentals that every Spirit team needs, at least when you start to get to scale. Although a little outdated, VIP Karma, it's a must. It's the only way that we can actually track accounts, get the data, and if a team member leaves, but you happen to be in that city, know the volume, velocity that we're doing, the numbers, the ups, the downs. In Texas, it's called Y drinks. Again, you have to pay for this data. We have used more tech stacks and more apps and programs than I care to admit. And we always come back to the basics of that. There are things like SOM AI that will scrub the internet for all the menus driven velocities and whatnot. Your distributor most likely has a program that shows their top 100 accounts. For us, it really comes down to VIP and constant communication. Yeah, it's a little more old school, but there are a bunch that I think do have companies. I think Overproof is a great one if for brands that need a full tech stack all piled into one. I think there's a lot of companies like that that are coming out that are reinvigorating it. And then I think from a digital campaign, there's obviously Pro V. There's like the Breakthrough now, the ERNDCs of the world that are good for promotion. But yeah, for us, it's just old school social VIP karma. Unfortunately, I don't have the CRM solution because we've overpaid for them so much over the years that we went back to the bare bones.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm curious to hear a little bit about your distribution strategy. How has it evolved over time?
So at first it was really a grind. It was hand selling, it was getting out into market, doing the blitzes, and that was it. Now it's doing all that, but plus finding distribution efficiencies, making logistical challenges easier. We used to one warehouse in Florida, and that was it. And now we warehouse in New Jersey and California. And now we can hit all distribution houses at once. And we warehouse in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. So we cover all of Europe. And we're 30 days ahead of shipment. So we're shipping before people have requested product in international territories. Distribution efficiency is realizing that distributors don't build brands. Velocity in market builds brands that distributors want to then distribute. Getting a distributor to launch you nationwide just means you have a truck that might deliver you, but that's not a win. It's not. Velocity going through, it's not shipments, it's depletions. It's not depletions, it's reorders to velocity. Having accounts for 18 months, 24 months, reorder. And once you start to get that down in one market, then go to the next one. But until you've accomplished that in a state, don't then go launch another state. And I think that's a common mistake so many brands make is they think footprint matters more than velocity, and it's how brands overextend, lose their working capital, and get depleted.
Yeah, yeah. Well, looking ahead, what do you see as the biggest emerging opportunities for Chinola?
So I think we're right now in the right place at the right time. We are the US's number one fresh fruit liqueur, but that's not a good saying because we're very far behind the synthetic liqueurs. There are legacy brands that have been around forever. We are in a space where people are drinking less. Sure, I could argue about the data, but or that would be a whole nother podcast where I'll convince you that what they're saying might be a little skewed because they use a demographic that is 15 to 21. Analytics on that side is a different day. They might be drinking less, but they're drinking better. They might be more moderate zebra striping, so they're drinking low ABV. They want to know where their food sources come from. And, we saw early on that food and beverage was adapting in the non-alc space, the snack space, but not the liquor space. We adapted that very early. People want to know where their resources came from. We're paid fair wages. We're done so sustainably. We're done so organically. If you see where I'm going with this, we were just a few years ahead of the curve, and now we're on trend. So we are all those things. We can be low ABV. We hit the natural, more sustainable route. We've paid fair wages. We've paid our homage. We use better for you ingredients. And when developing the brand, not only staying holistic to what we wanted to accomplish in terms of the liquid that eventually came out and not compromised on that, we stay true to our price. We've never once changed the price. We have taken price hits in the sense of a hurricane comes in and most people say we're going to bat down the hatches. For us, we might wipe out an entire farm. And then prices will spike. We might get shortage on glass. So we might need to change the bottle. We've identified and stayed true to our price and never pass on to our consumer. We've always used the most premium fruit and never cut corners. And it's a lot of things that have allowed us to keep the hierarchy of the brand. And when we launch something new, we're able to sell thousands of cases before it hits market because people trust us and we've done the right thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what advice would you give founders who are entering the category today who want to build a brand with staying power?
Find a problem and solve it. There are ways to have genuine stories. And right now, the Chinola story is easy because we're telling the truth. Like we're able to tell a genuine story that most of my team and most of the trade has lived. Brands need to find a problem and solve it. So if you're a cocktail solution, or you're going to do really well in a premium cocktail program, you should probably focus on on-premise. It's more expensive. If you're pretty self-explanatory and people will pick the bottle and know what to do with it, you should probably start in retail. I haven't seen many brands that hit the inflection point of being in both sides where it's intuitive, unless it's a pre-batch. And I mean, RTDs were the inflection point, but they're retail heavy because bars know how to make a cocktail. I think for founders, find the problem you want to solve and find a more efficient way to do it. And if you want to be in the on-premise, make it affordable to the on-premise. If you want to be in the off-premise, make it education really simple and easy and start there and don't get distracted. The worst thing you can do is look at the shiny object and someone to say, I'll bring you to all 50 states or I'll launch you in Costco or Walmart. They're all great retailers. I'll put you on Delta Airline. If they drop you, you'll never pick that value back up. So the second piece of advice is grow to build a business you're going to be happy about in 10 years. Do not grow to exit. The second you start saying, I'm building this tequila brand to sell in 5 years for $1 billion, is the day that you're going to grow backwards. You're going to try to grow into something that is a top line revenue chaser, a volume chaser, and you're going to do it incorrectly. For me, when we started building Chinola, everyone asked what the target was. And I said, dividend checks. We're going to pay you a dividend check. And because of that, we've hit an inflection point where we burn little cash. We're almost profitable. And we'll do our 55,000 9-liter cases this year, which means we'll do over 730,000 bottles of Chinola, which also means we'll do over 20 million cocktails. We didn't grow by 300% year over year, but we grow at a really sustainable 30, 40% year over year. And we don't give a lot of things away for free.
Yeah. And with a sustainable operational infrastructure. Important. So as a last question, we always like to ask guests, let's say that a drinks entrepreneur asks you for a book, online class, movie, person to follow. Who or what would you recommend to provide inspiration or insight?
And this is where it really comes down to the person. I love a good book that's short, sweet, has some pictures in it with not a ton of verbiage. I think the best class you can do is go to the bar, go to the restaurant, go to the retailer. Funny enough, a friend of mine who I've now invested behind with Yoshi, the new matcha liqueur, he sent me a photo the other day holding a bottle of Chinola, I swear to God, and I recognized the floor. And I said, are you at Astor Wine and Spirits right now? He's like, yes. And he asked, how do you know? And I was like, give it a few years. You will recognize your best retailers' floor schemes. You'll see how they promote that little necker in the background. You'll know that's them without any words needed. If you want to know how hospitality works, go watch a shift from start to finish, how restaurants work, how bars are done. I think it's all done visually. If you want to watch a few movies, Thank You for Smoking is probably the most inappropriate, best way to learn it. If you think alcohol has a hard time, big pharma, tobacco, ammunitions. So Thank You for Smoking, I think, has a few of the one-liners that really did it for me. I said economy because if I can get one person to smoke a pack of Marlboro Reds by the end of my flight, I paid for it. It's not what I'm promoting, but it's a really good sales strategy. Cocktail being the classic if you want to see, because although it takes a funny approach with Tom Cruise, it does show you what a bartender goes through from start to finish in the first 30 minutes of that movie. And once you understand that mentality, you'll understand how to talk to them a little better. Where they are a hired gun for 8-9 hours a day on an hourly wage. And you see the stress that they have, you'll know how to talk to them better, maybe how to empathize with them. And when it comes to books, it depends what side of the business you're on. If you're on the branding side, Trademark is as good as it's going to get in Tide and Blue Ocean. If you really want to understand at a higher level the sales approach and the mental capacity. But for me, everything I do is tangible and it's in field. And go visit 30 retailers, 30 accounts, and do it in a city that might not make the most sense. Go to Omaha, Nebraska, and sell your product in there. And if you could do it there, you could probably do it anywhere.
I love that. So many great recommendations for our audience to jump into and explore. Well, I think that is a great note for us to end on. So, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us again on Business of Drinks.
Awesome. I really appreciate you having me. And like I said, looking forward to connecting soon over a fun Chinola cocktail.
Thanks for joining us on Business of Drinks. Subscribe on YouTube at Business of Drinks Podcast. Follow us on Spotify or listen in on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. Please tap the notification button so you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops.
And help us spread the word. Click those star ratings, give us a review, and share episodes or clips on your socials. It really helps us reach new listeners.
Finally, if there's something that you'd like us to cover on the podcast, tell us. We're at podcast@businessofdrinks.com or reach out via Instagram or LinkedIn.
We love hearing from you, and we respond to each and every message. Thanks, and see you next time.